had a fascinating email yesterday where someone sent me a link to somebody using a drone to live stream a football match and asked me about the legal implications of doing so. Now, obviously, there's a number of legal implications here. It is not entirely straightforward. It never is, and that's why I hope you watch my channel. So if you do watch my channel and you enjoy it, please do subscribe, because about 70% of you don't do that. If you're new to me and you've no idea who I am and why you should subscribe, my name's Daniel Smith. I'm a barrister of England and Wales, and I've dedicated a lot of time over the last 4 years helping you to understand law. I enjoy doing it, and clearly people enjoy watching it. I get 3 to 5 million views a month, and I'm very grateful for that. But I'd be really grateful if those 3 to 5 million people subscribed down below. That would help my channel grow, and that's the one thing I really enjoy. So please do that, and I'm grateful for that. Let's look at the legal implications here. The first thing people are going to ask is, does he need permission from the stadium? Now, that depends on from whereabouts the drone takes off. Because if it doesn't take off on the stadium grounds, the premises, the land which is owned and controlled by the stadium, then no, he doesn't need their permission, so long as that the drone is flown sufficiently high above the stadium so that it's out of the controlled airspace of the stadium. Because case law has told us that landowners control the airspace immediately above for their normal enjoyment of the land. Now, this has a furious debate in the comment section on a number of occasions. Some people quite boldly saying that I'm wrong, which I'm not, by the way. At least in my view, of course, I'm not, and I'd stand to be corrected if a court ever said so otherwise. But the courts have already decided that the landowners only control the airspace immediately above the land for the reasonable enjoyment of that land. Let's contrast this with a residential premises. There's only so much a residential house can do with the airspace above the land, and beyond that, they don't control it. It's arguably different with a stadium, because they will obviously have permissions, it's higher, it's for a different purpose, so on and so forth. But you'll obviously see helicopters flying above and things like that, and obviously they can't control those. And at the same time, there are also drone height limits, and I don't know how high these stadiums are, but there are height limits that these drones can fly within CAA regulations, which I'll come back to in a minute. But as long as it's above the airspace that they control, but below the maximum limits set by the CAA, then strictly speaking, there's nothing wrong with flying the drone over the stadium there, and they won't need permission so long as they're not taking off from stadium premises. That's issue number one. Issue number two, in no particular order, might be of data protection, because if any individual captured is identifiable, which arguably the players are, but then again, they are public figures, so that is slightly different to any ordinary member of the public. I'll come back to that in a minute. But ordinarily, if any individual, let's take someone in the crowd, if any individual were identifiable and they were captured in this video, then the person with the drone would generally need to comply with data protection regulations. But even then, they might rely on a journalistic exemption in that getting consent or informing or complying with the rights of each and every individual in the crowd would be incompatible with the journalistic purpose of filming the football match, then they might be able to rely on that journalistic exemption anyway. But coming back to the players are obviously public figures, they are public sports people, and they might expect to be filmed and captured whilst they are on the pitch. And so they have not a lower expectation of privacy in a sense, but they can expect that it is normal that they'll be filmed and photographed whilst on the pitch, and that they will be publicised in that way. There are obviously certain moral rights in certain situations, but whilst they're on the pitch, whilst they're playing, I don't see any issue with this at all. Then we come to an issue of safety and CAA regulations and so on. Now, it's unclear from the bit that I watched. I didn't watch all of it. These are general comments and not legal advice for that matter. But if the drone were to be flying over the crowd, that is a big no, regardless of the size of the drone. Because even with the teeny tiny ones, now a lot of people will say that you have to be 50 meters away from all buildings and that sort of stuff. That doesn't apply in a straightforward sense to the sub 250 gram category of drones. The very tiny ones, so the likes of the Mavic Mini. I've got a Mavic Mini over there. I've used it before. I love drones for that matter, but I also respect the law and the regulations. There's a fantastic channel about drone law. We are talking about doing a joint podcast together. It's Geek Svana. I'll link him in the description below. Go check him out. It's a fantastic channel if you're interested in drones. But the bottom line is you cannot fly these things over a crowd, however teeny and tiny they are. But it's not clear from this video that they're actually flying it over the crowd. There's an argument that there might be a crowd outside or a group of people, which is, there's no specific definition from my recollection, but 30 people or more would be a crowd. Clearly in the stadium, there's more than 30 people. Outside the stadium, there might be a group of 30 people, so that would be a security and a safety consideration. But otherwise, you would have to be flying the drone completely within the CAA regulations in order to be complying with the law. And if not, then obviously you'd be breaking those regulations and you might be committing a criminal offense. Also worth bearing in mind, it is a criminal offense to be flying a drone recklessly to endanger any property or person. And so there are obviously safety implications there as to whether this is recklessly endangering property or person. And that in itself might be a criminal offense, even if you're flying within the CAA regulations. Remembering, of course, with CAA regulations, there are also areas that are just no-go areas, such as those near airports. And many stadiums are very close to airports, which are no-fly zones, even for the little teeny tiny drones. So you shouldn't be flying anywhere near those. And many built-up cities have restricted areas as well, so you should obviously take note of those. So wherever you are flying, you should obviously check maps, etc. for flight restrictions. And moving on to another point that somebody I saw in the comments to one of these videos said that the stadium would be able to confiscate said drone if they found it to be flying over the stadium. Now, I don't agree with that, particularly if it hasn't taken off from the land owned or controlled by the stadium, because they have no jurisdiction, they have no control. They could potentially refer that to the police, and the police could potentially confiscate it, but only if the police genuinely believed that it was recklessly endangering the public and so on, and that would be a debate for the police to have. But so long as it's within all of those reasonably difficult to comply with regulations, this drone is probably okay. But, of course, my general guidance would be, unless you are trained and certified and qualified and insured, which is another point that you should consider, I just wouldn't do it, because it's so fraught with difficulties and dangers and problems. You are likely to see yourself in trouble for it. Whether or not that is justified would be a matter to sort out later, but it doesn't stop you from being potentially arrested, potentially having it confiscated, and potentially having them look into you for reckless endangerment of other people. Because despite the fact that it might be away from the crowd, anything could go wrong, such as a flyaway scenario, that is where a drone gets out of control, flies off, and then falls and crashes. It could fall and crash into a crowd of people. And the reason for the crowd, by the way, being distinct from an individual is, quite obviously, it is more likely to hit a person if it's a crowd of people than a single person. Let's say you're flying it in the park and there's one person in the middle of the park and you're flying around. The likelihood of it hitting that one person in the middle of the park is far lower than hitting a person in the middle of a crowd. So my guidance for this is, unless you are fully qualified, certified, insured, etc., I wouldn't be doing it. But as for GDPR and all of those kind of things, there are some implications there as well as to whether individuals are identifiable and how you're using it and so on. But overall, I found this a fascinating scenario because live streams of various things like this are more and more frequent. I've come across some of them, even professionally, talking about certain things. It is fraught with difficulties, it is fraught with dangers, and I would suggest if you're going to do this, you really ought to be fully qualified and certified, insured, etc. But leave me your thoughts and your comments in the box below. Do remember to subscribe, and of course, thank you for watching.